Welcome to Seeking God, where we consider the questions and stories regarding our faith. Crosses. Everywhere crosses. Sometimes they were in pictures, sometimes they were present in and of themselves, but there were crosses everywhere when I was growing up. We were a very conservative Christian home, and crosses were important. They were hanging on the wall, they were sitting on tables, they were on top of churches, they were in people's yards. Everywhere you looked, there were crosses. Now for us, because of our belief systems, those crosses were rather plain. But for others, they are and were ornate. Crosses are symbols. They are symbols that represent something about our faith. They are not in and of themselves the subject or object of our faith. Rather, as symbols, they point in a particular direction, and they have a certain meaning that we can assign or explain about them. We know historically that crosses were a means of execution, capital punishment. Yet that often is not the way in which they're used. That's not what they represent. Rather, they represent something that is deeper and more important about our lives, something that represents our faith. Now, crosses are not the only symbols of faith. There's the Star of David. There is someone sitting in a lotus position. There is a Buddha. There are various symbols of faith. And I think it's important that we remember when we see those that they are not in and of themselves the object or subject of faith. They are merely signposts that point us in a particular direction. It's a little dangerous when we see those and then begin to interpret their meaning in someone's life. If you're wearing a cross or a Star of David on a necklace, I can make an assumption about that and I can make an interpretation about that, but I have to be careful. For you see, the true meaning really comes only from you. Symbols represent something deeper in our lives. Even with crosses, they can mean different things. For us growing up, it was a simple cross that was important because somehow that represented the cross that was used to crucify Christ. But for others, there was a more ornate cross, or one that was a crucifix that had the body or the corpus hanging on it. Things that we did not acknowledge. But also, for me, the cross came to represent something positive. It came to represent for me the love of the divine in the world, the willingness of the divine to come and die amongst us. And for me, it became a representation, a symbol of love. But for others, it's a symbol of hate. Once, as a college student, I drove by a lot where it seemed something was happening. It was a field. And as we drove by, I noticed some people standing by the road and that there were two crosses on propane gas tanks sitting there burning. And as we drove by and saw cars pulling in, there was a huge cross in the field. and it was clear that it was there to be burned. For those that were gathering there, it was a symbol of hate. When we talk about symbols, be they crosses or the Star of David or a Buddha statue or any other of the myriad representation, symbols of faith that people claim and use in their lives, I find that there are a couple of things that kind of get going for me as I think about them. One is that oftentimes we claim symbols that are representative of faith that we may not understand what their meaning is for us, that particular symbol. You wearing a cross around your neck on a chain may represent to you something completely different. Or you may have just simply gotten it because you like the ornamentation. So I would suggest to us that we have symbols in our lives that are important to us that we have not thought through. So I invite us to take some time and look at the symbols in our life. What are they? And then for ourselves to discover what their true meaning may be in our lives and how they may represent something for us of our faith. The second thing that I would suggest, and I've certainly found this to be true for me, is that as I grow in the depth of my spirituality, as I begin to deepen my relationship with the divine and with the holy, I find that the symbols of my faith change, and the ways in which I represent them in my life, that changes too. And I have some way of ability to make those changes myself. Crosses in my life now are no longer plain. I love what they may offer beyond what the plainness, even though I see that as being of value. But I've also come to see that there are other symbols in my life of faith about where I am. Open arms, be they in statues or in photos or in paintings, are very important to me and represent something about how I present my faith and understand my relationship with the holy. That somehow, for me, open reception of the divine, that God or the divine is somehow there with open arms inviting me in, helps me to grow in my love of God. And those symbols are very important. So what are the symbols that are important in your life? Do they represent something about your faith? What do they say about your own desire to seek the holy and to have it present in your life? Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for joining me in seeking God.